Thank you again for this transportation. And I can't say enough about Jim and Ken and Competitive Wisconsin for putting together these accelerators across the state of Wisconsin. 8 total of these accelerators. And so I'm very honored. We have some just some distinguished guests for all of you. So let me introduce many of those to you. Craig Thompson, a dear friend, Secretary of Wisconsin, the Department of Transportation. Debbie Jackson, Executive Director, Transportation Development Association of Wisconsin. David Noyce, author, F. Hahn Professor of Transportation Engineering Executive Associate, Dean and Director of the Traffic Operations and Safety, and Mark O'Connell, President and CEO of Wisconsin Counties Association. And so as Jim was framing this, for you all that know or don't know, Madison Region Economic Partnership, we are now charged by the federal government. We just submitted an application to go into the process of our comprehensive economic development strategy. So for our 8-county region, which includes Rock County, where are we going? What's the strategy? And transportation is one of those, which is why MadRep wanted to partner with Competitive Wisconsin to do that. And so to kick this off and get started for this distinguished panel, the question on the table, and I would love to go down the line from each one of you, is why is getting the transportation formula correct for Wisconsin? And let me preface that by saying in my role, we are often competing against Boston, Austin, Texas, North Carolina. You see the state of Wisconsin got $4.5 billion. Why is it important that we get this transportation formula correct? And Secretary, let's start with you.
Well, thanks, Jason. It really is a key question. And if you look at the most recent bipartisan infrastructure law, there's a lot that's not in the formula part. There's a lot of discretionary programs, which is a fairly hot topic of discussion as well with a lot of DOTs in the state. But for the part that is formula driven, when you look at Wisconsin, we're fairly unique in the fact that we obviously have our largest urban area, which is Milwaukee, which the majority of the states have as well. But then a lot of them will have the major urban area, and then a lot more rural out. Like look at Minnesota as an example. Once you get out of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, but Wisconsin really has a lot of medium-sized cities scattered throughout the state. So we are agriculture, we are rural. Our farm-to-market infrastructure has been hugely important in how this state was built, but we've also got a lot of cities that are throughout the state. So we're kind of an interesting state as it pertains to that. And so when it comes to formula dollars and some of that, it's interesting. Now I will say, and I have a feeling my colleague Debbie Jackson could probably expound upon this, but we do get more than $1 back for every dollar we send in. And that happened way back when Congressman Petri was here, but to be honest with you, at this point, since we're funding transportation beyond the user fee, we're using a lot of general fund dollars at the federal level. Almost every state is getting more than $1 back for the dollar they're sending in. Now, how sustainable that is a whole other question. Texas is one of the few states that's not. So from that standpoint, we're doing pretty well in the formula, but it really does matter because we're a unique state, and those known certain dollars that are coming in, not competitive dollars, but those known dollars that are coming in is what we can plan on, what the industry can plan on. So it really is hugely important for the states to know that.
If I can rephrase it, why is it important that in terms of transportation we get it right? Here's why. While we have a lot of government in Wisconsin and a lot of local government, if we are going to succeed as a state, it is going to be because the private sector does really, really well. We need more people making more money, engaged in more commerce, paying more in taxes at current or even lower rates. That's what we need to succeed. So if that's what we need, we have to ask ourselves, what is it that the private sector needs to be successful? Well, that's a whole long list of things, but 3 that rise to the top are 1, smart young talent, the new wealth makers of tomorrow; 2, available capital to invest, to risk, to grow, to expand; and 3, infrastructure, whether it's soft infrastructure like broadband or hard infrastructure like transportation. Those are the necessary ingredients for a successful economy. So what does it take? Why is it important that we get it right? Because we're not living for today. We're laying the brickwork for a successful future of our state. And as such, We need to invest in transportation as one of the necessary ingredients for that success. That's why it's important.
Well, I think the previous two speakers have made a lot of the points in very eloquent ways. I sum it up that transportation means opportunities. And it means, and it's the opportunities that come from safe mobility. And those opportunities may be personal. My ability to get a better paying job because the job I'm seeking is on a bus route. Or it could be a business opportunity. If you were driving in this morning, you saw the Dollar General warehouse that was made possible by the investment that we made in I-3990 and other infrastructure investments. So when we talk about transportation, it's economic development. It is the quality of life for people in Wisconsin. But fundamentally, we're talking about the cornerstones of our communities and the foundation on which we are going to build a better and more prosperous Wisconsin.
Thank you, Jason. Good morning, everybody. At the University of Wisconsin in Madison, we see our role as being the technology development leader. So what we do and what we hope to be able to bring to the state of Wisconsin is not only a world-class university, which I hope you all agree we do well, but also to develop technology and be leaders in the things that are important to transportation today. I mean, we're focusing on what does this future of automated vehicles look like? What is the future of electric vehicles? We may talk a bit about hydrogen fuel as a future and the fuel cell type opportunities. And we always think about transportation safety and the infrastructure and so on. We realize that it's been proven over time that if we are leaders, we not only create opportunities, we create spin-off businesses, we create the workforce that we all need, but we also draw it, right? So we bring opportunities, and you can name any one of the examples across this country of where they have a strong university leading the way. It leads to great opportunity in the transportation sector, which gets to all the questions and topics that we want to talk about today. So our role is to really try and bring the technology that's going to help us all move forward.
We've talked about, why it's important, but I see my good friends, Jeff, former Representative Jeff Stone in the audience. I see Rob Call, who will be talking. I think the three of us are all suffering from political withdrawal from leaving the legislature. So I would like to ask, what are the obstacles? And I mean, Mark, you mentioned, what the private sector needs, but from your opinion, and you've dealt with a number of us from every level, and if I can ask this question of each of you, what are the obstacles? I mean, when you look at this and go, if we could get rid of that knucklehead, we'd be better off. If we could get this funding level, what are the obstacles that prevent us from getting this right?
Good question, Jason. And the answer is actually, to me, surprisingly simple. Somewhere along the way, we decided in Wisconsin that dollars put into our infrastructure, into transportation, was spending as opposed to an investment. And when we flipped that switch, the conversation changed entirely. In my opinion, we don't spend a single dollar on transportation in this state, but we invest a good number of them. Not enough, but a good number. So we need to go back where we thought dollars put into transportation was an investment in our future rather than a today expenditure.
Is it possible to just say ditto to that? Is that a reasonable answer? I know. No, I couldn't agree with that more. And I think, again, the investment that Mark talks about, that has historically been done with user fee dollars. And those user fees have generally come in the form of gas tax registration fees and now to a bit title fees. I think a lot of people in the state have lost that connection of realizing that and talking about the dollars that they are investing, where it's going, and how that's separate. So I think, as we're going to have talks, we're going to talk about on future panels, that dynamic's going to be changing a bit as we transition from gasoline cars, but the concept is still the same. And whether we believe in that user fee concept, and if we do, that we realize that is something government is going to do, not the private sector, and it is an investment. So, I think we need to re-engage the public on that because without buy-in, it becomes very difficult. We've been able to make some good progress both at the state and federal level lately, but it feels, I think, a little bit to people like maybe episodic as opposed to a more of a transformational change. And I don't think that happens until we get the public buying into that concept again of what Mark talked about, it being an investment, and where those separate dollars that users who use the system pay for that investment.
So I think Jim kind of referenced this in his opening remarks. In a lot of ways, we have a system that allows us to do spectacular things. And we take it for granted. We assume that the snowplow is going to come, that the highway that connects us to our job is going to be in good condition, that the bus is going to be there, that our kids are going to have a safe route to school. And we make that assumption that that is going to continue, and we don't have to maintain it, and we don't have to step forward to improve it. And so our challenge is to explain to people that by the time they're seeing issues in their daily experience, we're really behind the 8 ball. And so it is about communication, and it is letting people know about the value of what they're getting when we invest, but also the flip side, which is what a system failure could mean in terms of our economy.
Yeah, I'm also going to build off Mark's initial comments here and say that investing in technology is truly an investment, and investing in what the future of the transportation system is going to look like. It's not spending, it's an investment. And to be a leading state in this country, we have to do that. I give Secretary Thompson a lot of credit here because we've been doing much more of that under his leadership, and that's been great to see Wisconsin grow in some of the future investments that we're looking at. But let me simply end with that by saying, it is an investment, and we need to continue to think about that as we move forward.
I'm going to ask a couple of maybe individual questions, and Dean, I want to start with you. Where are we compared to other states when it comes to the technology, when it comes to moving forward? Are we competitive, or as Debbie said, we may be behind? Where are we at nationally when you compare us to your colleagues in other states?
Would you like an honest answer? I would love it. We're behind. I mean, there's no question about it. We're growing. We're making progress. But if you look at the states that are known as being leaders in the types of things that I think about from a university perspective, we have a long ways to go. And it's not totally just an investment, but it's in philosophy. Do we want to be a state that wants to push the envelope and look at what the future of transportation is going to be, and be willing to move forward, take some risks, and look at different types of things along those lines. So we have some room to grow.
Debbie, you mentioned that people take for granted the everyday life and consequences. What do we do to change that?
I think it is about communicating consistently about the investments that we are making and explaining to people how their dollars are put to work for them, and perhaps giving them input into making those decisions so they feel like they're part of the solution and that we're all working together to build a transportation system that services us all and moves us all forward.
Secretary, I'm going to come to you last, but Mark, I want to go to you because you said something earlier that caught my attention, and I believe you guys just did a study not too long ago that says roughly Wisconsin will lose a net 34,000 residents, I believe it was something like that, and you mentioned young families' talent. Should we be concerned? I mean, should we be ringing the alarm and saying if we don't get transportation correct or right, that number will be higher?
Yeah, one of the smartest people in the state of Wisconsin is a man named Dale Knapp, and he heads up this entity called Forward Analytics, a research entity. Dale he's the person who did a lot of the work at the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance, highly regarded, well respected. Dale put together a report that essentially said, not only should we pull the alarm, it's here. We have a workforce shortage today that is getting a lot worse. We don't grow enough young people. We don't attract enough young people. We don't keep enough young people. This is a gorgeous campus here at Blackhawk Technical College here in Janesville area. And we have campuses like this all over the state of Wisconsin where we grow a lot of really bright, smart young talent, but we don't keep them. One of the elements that will attract the smart young talent of tomorrow, and it's a long list, and by the way, taxes isn't one of them. When you're a smart young person, you're not looking for where taxes are low. Why is that? Because you're not making any money. So when someone says, I'm going to take less from you, the smart young talent is saying, well, that's fine, but I don't have any to begin with. So you're going to take less of the less that I get? What they're looking for, and it's a long list of things, but when you look at the list that young people find attractive, 80% of that list are things that government funds. And one of them is infrastructure transportation. We might term infrastructure on the soft side, broadband everywhere you can breathe, walkability, bikeability, the ability to get from one place to another using a vehicle or other means. But transportation is a big part of that. So if we want to position ourselves for future success in attracting the smart young talent of tomorrow, which is the fuel for the private sector economic engine, which is necessary for our state to succeed, then investments in transportation really are a no-brainer.
Thank you, Mark. And Jim corrected me as a father would. That was 130,000. So, question, Secretary, and this is from knowing you and knowing how you work on a very bipartisan fashion. I've known you for years. What are your top 3 priorities when you say, hey, here's where I think we should be going when it relates to transportation? And has the road been easy or hard? I mean, you work in a bipartisan fashion. Easy or hard, and what are the top 3 priorities?
When I took this job, I was about 6'2", and I had a full head of hair, so it's been easy. I would say that if you look at transportation in Wisconsin, again, we talk about this a lot, but we're agriculture, manufacturing, and tourism. So I think one of the top 3 priorities has to be the condition of that transportation system and the reliability. For our manufacturers, the reliability. For agriculture, farm to market, the reliability. For tourism, the reliability and the safety. Second is what Mark just talked about, is, I just talked about the reliability for moving product, for moving goods, which is so important to attracting businesses here for one of the components that is one of the biggest cost components for them, which is transportation logistics costs. But the second, as we've talked about across the entire country, we're facing demographic changes that we knew were coming and workforce challenges, and in Wisconsin we've got some acute ones. So how do you attract the workers? How do you get the people? So the second priority would be a transportation system that provides mobility, that will attract the workforce that we need. And a lot of that gets beyond reliability and conditions of roads. That does get to the other connections, to transit, to those other linkages, even bike and ped. Some of those are amenities, but some of those are how people are going to get to work. But there are a lot of folks that can choose where they want to work now, and that is one of the things they are looking at. Do they have to have a car to get to work, or can they be, on their computer, on a train, on transit system, or the other? And then the third priority would be what Dr. Noyce is talking about. The transportation in this country is going to be changing rapidly with the technology that's coming, and we need to, I feel like we're making some strides, and I will tell you the UW and the TOPS lab is, while Wisconsin as a state, I would agree with Dr. Noyce, we've got a ways to go, but that's not because of them. They are top-notch, and they are viewed that way in the country. But if we're not where we need to be on artificial intelligence and machine learning and on all the different things, we will be behind, because other states are moving forward in that, and it's going to become more and more important. So I would say that reliability of the conditions, having a transportation mobility that attracts the workers that want to work here, and being at the forefront or getting to the forefront of technology that's going to be transforming transportation.
We live in an environment where there tends to be more, I think, finger pointing and blaming. And I'm not here to argue one way or the other, but is it fair to say that the business community should step up more And let me preference that. At MadRep, we're doing a transportation pilot, van pools where we're subsidizing and to get more businesses a part of that. But is it fair or unrealistic to just throw all of this on the businesses? Or should more municipalities be picking up the tab for all the different types of transportation methods? Should we be putting as much onus on the business community, or is it fair to just say, maybe the municipality should take care of that? That's their role. Dean, I'll start with you.
Sure. From our experience, and admittedly from the university's perspective, we don't interact a ton with the business community and really help drive some of that. But let me say this. What I do know is that when we create innovation, when we demonstrate the innovation, and we work with our local communities in places like the beautiful Blackhawk College here, it does create the opportunity that we need, and businesses see that. And we spin off businesses in terms of some of the technology we develop, and we help lead some of those partnerships. So I would love to see our businesses across the state step up more, but I think from at least my perspective, we have to create some of the opportunity to stimulate that relationship and get them involved in the things that we want them to be involved in.
I think as we advocate for transportation investment, we really can't have too many people involved, and I certainly think the business community has an important role to play. But it's up to us as transportation stakeholders to give them ways to participate that, that they'll be comfortable with. As far as, pushing items to municipalities, we have a local government expert on the panel, but they don't have a lot of flexibility in the ways in which they fund transportation. So I think it's up to all of us to work on ways to grow the ways in which we can fund transportation and diversify our portfolio.
So I guess to go to the part about the municipalities, I would say, to build on what Debbie just said, if you look at the municipalities funding, whether it's transit systems for the cities and a couple of the counties, or whether it's even through local roads, they've got three ways to do it. They've got the property tax, they've got shared revenue, and then they get the aids for transportation that they get from the state. Property taxes, they have rate limits on them. They haven't changed, and I don't think most people want it to be put on there, quite frankly. The shared revenue hasn't changed in, I don't know, Mark, how long? Decades. Decades it hasn't changed. And, aids for transportation on the roadside, we've had some good increases in the last couple of years, but that's trying to catch up for decades as well. So I don't know that it's possible for us to ask municipalities to do more unless we gave them more tools, like most states have, where they've got the ability to raise the money locally. So, and I will say, when it comes to transit and other things, we're seeing, and by the way, Jason, the great things that you talked about trying to do at MadRep, we're seeing more businesses come to the table because I was up in the central part of the state with a new program that was put out where they're finding these micro rides beyond the bus system, and Tyson Foods actually went to the next step of talking of when they would ask questions of folks that didn't make it a year as to why, and lack of transportation was the reason in 30% of those cases. So they've begun to document that. There is a flex ride program that's going on in the Pewaukee area right now. It's almost like an Uber type of program where employers are putting in the money. There's money from the National Science Foundation. The governor put in money with some of the ARPA money that we had. But the businesses are doing that because they realize that they have skin in the game and they're going to need to do it. And I think they're willing to. But I think it's a broader conversation with the employers. So to your point, I think they need to be. I think a lot of them are willing to, but we've got to create an atmosphere that it makes sense for them to.
Well, Jason, it's an interesting question, and let me go at it a little bit differently. I know it's popular to latch on to the concept of if you use it, you should pay for it, and there is certainly a place for that in public and private sector, but not always. For example, you cannot ask people who are benefiting from a function like foster care to pay for it. You cannot ask people who are suffering from mental illness and need a government assistance to pay for it. The resources are not there. Yet, we as society put resources toward that because it maintains this delicate fabric we call society. It's important for us to have a successful society and state. In a big leap, transportation is like that. Whether it's moving large numbers of people that in a system that doesn't generate enough revenue to cover all of its costs, yet brings workers from where they are to where they need to be, which positions our state for future success with more people making more money, engaged in more commerce, and being employed, or whether it is from people that contribute tax dollars toward transportation, yet never step foot on a roadway. All of those things position our state for success. So, back to the question, does business need to step up? Everyone needs to step up. We all do. We all need to realize that if we want a successful state for generations to come, if we want a place where people want to be here, if we want businesses wanting to come to Wisconsin to employ people, if we want wealth makers of tomorrow to come to this state to plant their roots and grow, then yes, then we all need to step up. We all need to engage. We all need to participate. We all need to speak about the future and take dollars out of our pocket toward infrastructure. Yes, we all need to do that, everyone.
My couple of questions. I want to lead with this one, though. We talk about funding, and I'm always just how much? What's the number? I love to get to it. What's the number? And so I have 4 people here. What's the number, Dean? If we want to do this right, what's the number?
Well, I don't know if I know the answer to that question, so I may want to punt that one down to my colleagues to deal with that a little bit more closely. But I know that the answer probably from most people's perspective is no matter what the number is, it's never enough, right? And the number also is how it's distributed with the money that we have in terms of the different investments we make. So that's a long-winded answer of saying, I don't know. And I'm going to pass along.
If we could, I want to stay with you for a little bit. Talk about your wish list, right? If you're looking at transportation from your lens, what do we need to do?
Yeah. So from my perspective, and what we need to do is to take whatever pot of money we have and invest some part of that into thinking about the future, right? Into investing in technology. And I know that's not always a popular answer, in the sense when local communities and others need roads fixed and need paving and need potholes filled and so on and so forth, and taking some of those precious dollars and moving them to what's the future of autonomous transportation in the state, and some may not think that's a really good idea to invest money in at this moment in time when we have all these other needs across our transportation system. We talk a lot about safety as well. I mean, safety is a big investment. For us to keep our roadways safe and to improve them, it takes resources. But then we have to balance those resource needs against all the other demands we have. So I think trying to continue to make sure that we would allocate some amount of resources to be thinking forward is important, and hopefully we'll continue to do that.
How difficulty, and I'm going to stay with you for a second, Dean, how difficulty is it to maintain the infrastructure of our transportation? I believe you and I and Jim, we were meeting, and you were talking about how the safety and what we need to do to make sure the roads are adequately, consistently built up. I mean, how hard is that? How difficult is that?
I think the challenge from my perspective, and what we talk a lot about in the research program at the university, is we've made a lot of progress in terms of the safety of the infrastructure and how we design, how we build, how we lay out the systems. But we have not made a lot of progress into all of us, right? How drivers think and the behavior and all the so-called human factors elements that come into it. So our push in the technology side is, yes, we all have different opinions of what this future of an automated vehicle may look like. But if I can develop a system to where we don't have to think and I can take some of the human behavior out of the driving environment, that's a significant step forward in transportation safety. And then there's a a dominoes effect, if you will, in terms of the benefits that come across all the rest of the system when we do that, and then dollars are available for other types of things that we're talking about.
Are we speaking about electric vehicles? I mean, is that a direction we should be going? I don't know if I'm sold just on it all the way.
Well, I know Secretary Thompson's thinking an awful lot about that as we speak, as we're prepared to put, a number of charging stations in across the state of Wisconsin. But I think we have to, and I think that is the future of how transportation systems are going to operate. And we can also think about other fuel types, but certainly if you watch any television commercial now from an automobile manufacturer, they're what are they talking about? The future of electric vehicles. And by the way, most of them not even available yet, but they're advertising and they want your order, right? So yes, we need to be thinking about that. We need to be thinking about all these ways, and there's a ton of benefit, not only just from the environmental side, but in terms of how we operate the system and so forth that can come from that.
Debbie, same question. What's the number? And if you don't have one, then what do we need to be doing? I saw you shaking your head yes to some of the dean's comments.
Yeah, I always agree with the dean. There is no doubt that we have documented system needs. We've had reports over the years it's happened. And typically when they look at what the system needs are, they're looking at various scenarios. So as I've heard the Secretary say a number of times, the question is what kind of system do you want, and then we work backwards. But maybe before we even get to, let's say, filling what may be the needs that are still out there, we have to worry about our existing funding structure, which is a remnant of probably 50 years ago, relying on the flat fees, as the Secretary talked about, fees that do not grow with the economy like a percentage-based sale or income tax. So while the general fund has a very robust balance at the moment, Transportation Fund doesn't see that. So we have very little ability to deal with inflation in the fund on a year-over-year basis, and certainly not when we're seeing inflation at the levels we have now. And then as David is talking about, the movement towards technology, electric vehicles, we haven't made any serious attempts to look at shoring up or replacing what is still the state's largest single source of state revenue for transportation, which is the gas tax. So I think we kind of have to do two things at once. I think we need to shore up the revenue we have. We need to make sure that it can grow with inflation, and then I think we need to look longer term. What kind of system do we want, and then what kind of dollars do we need to get there?
Secretary, I'm going to come to you after Mark. I'm going to come to you last. Mark?
So how much is enough? The answer seems obvious to me. First, you fund every need the counties come up with. That's number one. And after we do that, we're going to have a great system, and it'll all be well. No. There is no easy answer, and especially us in county government, where we deal with hundreds and hundreds of issues, it's a very delicate balance. I mean, we could have the most modern, up-to-date, best infrastructure in the world, but if we have a society that's crumbling because we don't address mental illness or child welfare, we've got a big problem. It's a big balance. It's a balance that we need to deal with every day. I would say this. I've been all over this country. I deal with my colleagues all over this nation. I'm well aware of how almost every state operates in terms of infrastructure, state and local government. We have, and forgive me, Mr. Secretary, but we have one of the most visionary leaders in all of state government in the nation in Secretary Thompson. So if the Department of Transportation under the Secretary says, this is what we need to position our state for success, where are we in county government? We are ones to say, we're on board. Because it's not all about today. I mean, for way too long, we've been solving 1, 2, and sometimes 4-year challenges. And when the 1 and 2 year 4 years is up, we deal with another 1, 2, 4-year challenge. Really, our responsibility in government is to deal with challenges that are 10, 20, 30, 50 years in the future that go beyond our time. But that requires vision and fortitude to make big decisions today, the benefit of which we will not necessarily see. That takes resources that sometimes you cannot justify in the moment, but that position us for success. We have a department under the Secretary's leadership that thinks like that. So how much is enough? Well, we could come up with a number to take care of all of our roads that need to be maintained today, but it's a different number if we're talking about what is necessary to put Wisconsin, I guess maybe keep Wisconsin the best state in the nation when it comes to infrastructure. That's a different number, and I have no digits for you, Jason, but it's a delicate balance.
Big man on campus, Secretary, we're going to finish and close out with you.
Yeah, I don't really know how to follow up on what was just said, but I think is what Debbie said, and she's correct. My question back to you would be, what do you want? And then we'll work back, because it could be an infinite number, right? And so if you look at in Wisconsin, of the lane miles in the state, about 90% of them are under local jurisdiction. And so you could say, what would it take for all of those town, county, city, village streets to be to a certain standard? And you could get a number on that. And then you look at our state and interstates and state roads. Now, at the state level, we do have what I would consider a very robust asset management program, which works to say within the existing dollars we have, no matter what they are, we try to apply that to say what's the best decision for the health of the system. So just to be kind of specific, you might be in, and these are difficult decisions, right? But you might be in, let's say, Eau Claire or Superior, and there might be a road, and if you look at what would be the life cycle cost of that road, what would be the best decision, dollar and cent wise? And the answer may come back when the engineers and folks look at it to say to do a total reconstruct. It would get the most bang for your buck life. But for what that would cost versus the opportunity cost loss you have to put into the rest of the system, when we put it into our asset management and the algorithm, you come up with a different answer, right? It may be a three-inch mill and overlay that'll get you 6 to 8 years, but then you can get all this more money on all these other roads. And so the amount of money we have changes what that algorithm puts out for what you're going to do on that given road. So I come back to what do we want? And do we want every town road that has an average daily traffic of 8 cars to be engineered to the same as a major highway in Waukesha? Of course not. So there's, I'm not trying to not answer the question, but there is a point of, and there's also, let's say we even had the hard number, and let's say the delta is whatever, $10. That doesn't mean that, okay, we should have $10 right now because we're going to go out and fix all that at once. Capacity, the traveling public would kill us if every single road was under construction at the same time. So I think the end is to come to a point of agreeing of a range we need to, but then the consistency of the funding to get there, because no matter what, you're never there. You have a system that the moment you build it, it starts to age. And so if we can get to an area of consistency of funding that grows with the economy, then I think that's where, but I'm not sure I could give you an exact dollar amount right now and say once we get there, we're good.
Now, I want to thank you all, and thank you for that. I think the audience sees how just it's not an easy place to come to. It's not an easy solution, but there are things we should be doing. Thank you to Secretary Craig Thompson, Debbie Jackson, Dean David Noyce, and Mark O'Connell, this distinguished panelists for our first session.